All right. Good afternoon. It's always the new guy causing trouble. Just kidding, Lucas. I'm calling this meeting to order. It is 2 after 1. Welcome to the Transportation Standing Committee of Halifax Regional Council. My name is Wei Mason. I'm your chair and hostess today. We'll do the best we can to get through this with the people that we have. We have regrets from Councillor Kent. Councillor Edit says he's stuck in traffic, which I find particularly funny on your way to Transportation Standing Committee. And Councillor Russell is also, we believe, on his way. I'm going to continue to wear a mask today. I'll let the audience know that there was, while I'm testing negative, there was someone at the conference, at the meeting I was at in Ottawa 5 days ago who tested positive yesterday. So I do not believe I'm likely to get COVID at this point. It probably would have already happened, but out of abundance of caution, if you can't hear me mumbling through the mask, I apologize. We're also joined today by Colin Taylor, the very brave solicitor with the mask on, Katie Campbell, our clerk, Brad English, who's wisely chosen to sit in the audience, and Eric Bowdridge, our new legislative assistant. So we're called to order. I would like approval of the minutes of May 26. Moved by Councillor Mancini, seconded by Councillor Stoddard. Is there any further discussion, any errors and omissions? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stoddard. Yeah, if you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if you were going to do the acknowledgement.
Oh, sorry. Skipped over that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was right at the top, and thank you for correcting me, Councillor Stoddard.
Not a problem.
Again, that's why we have a vice chair. I also want to acknowledge that Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. And I believe was it yesterday? Well, we were at Halifax at Regional Center Community Council. We had National Indigenous Day. There was an event right here in the powwow last Saturday and Sunday. We are really happy to see that activity happening here in Grand Parade. All right, so we've completed 1 and 2. We move to 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Would someone care to put the motion on the floor? Moved by Councillor Mancini, second by Councillor Stoddard. I'll ask the clerk, are there any amendments to the agenda?
There are no amendments to the agenda.
Any questions regarding the agenda from the council? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Is there any business arising from minutes? Seeing none, call for declaration of conflict of interest. There are none. There is no motion of rescission, no motion of reconsideration, no consideration of deferred business, and no tabled matters, which brings us to item 10, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. 10.1, clerk, have we received any correspondence?
Yes, there's been correspondence for item 10.3.2 and item 12.1.2, as well as general correspondence that has been circulated to members.
Thank you very much. Brings us to 10.2, petitions. Clerk, have any petitions been submitted to the clerk's office?
There have been no petitions submitted.
Thank you. Members of the committee, are there any petitions? There are none. This brings us to 10.3, which is presentations. 10.3.1 is micromobility and vulnerable road users. Is Peter Zimmer here? Please come forward and we'll get you set up and we'll get you started momentarily. So once we have that up, I'll remind you that you have 10 minutes for presentations, and then you may have questions from the committee of clarification. Thank you. All right, so if we could have his mic. If you could press the button in front of you, there you go, and it'll light. There you go,
yes.
Red means go.
Good day, thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Peter Zimmer. I've been cycling in Halifax for about half a century. Over those decades, I've participated in many of the public engagement opportunities about streets and mobility. To get about Halifax, I bike, walk, take buses, rent cars from Communauto, and I take taxis. I'm mostly retired. In 2008, I co-founded CarShare HFX, which is now Communauto Atlantic. I'm the chair of the Halifax Cycling Coalition, and I represent the coalition on your Active Transportation Advisory Committee. But I'm speaking here today as a private citizen. I've thought a lot about the city's public pavements and pathways and how they interact in our real world compared to how the laws and procedures of the city and the province presumes they should interact. I'd say people and their safety should come first. In the past 2 centuries, we've built our public pavements, sidewalks, pathways, some of the biggest and most expensive shared parts of our city. They make up what I call the mobility commons. I'm urging you here today to take a different view, one based on how people are actually using our mobility commons and observations about how they're actually using new mobility technologies in the city. I'm hoping this can be the opening of a discussion on how we can meet the oncoming realities of growth in Halifax and climate change and the challenge of new technologies. The city has in recent years been thinking about how to make our streets work better. I took this graphic from a recent publication. I find that image on the right, called Complete Streets Hierarchy, both a little hard to see, especially when it's smaller, and it's hard to understand. It seems to indicate that people who walk are at the top of the heap, and people who drive alone are a little tiny pointy bit down at the bottom. Frankly, that's not the way our streets work. It's not the way our city works. Micromobility is here, and it's a growing choice for Haligonians. Couple quick pictures, micromobility vehicles. We all remember the Segway. It was hyped, it was going to take over the world. Well, it's a tourist attraction there on the upper left. On the upper right are one of Northwood's Cycling Without Age trishaws, carrying our elderly, mobility impaired people out for a voyage around the city, out in the fresh air. It's an electrically assisted tricycle. Below that are many of the other kinds of micromobility devices that we have. And I've seen them all on the streets except the big blue egg on the left. Another picture showing some AT. AT stands for Active Transportation. Under your mandate, the ATAC committee can only look at human muscle-powered mobility options. Electric? No, not so much. But there are many, many types based on active transportation. We have e-bikes and e-scooters and e-skateboards and on. Here's a picture of the mobility commons that I've spotted in Halifax. Blue means sometime in the recent past, I've seen people in those locations using those modes with those descriptions on the left on our streets. Well, this is my limited experience. It's not statistical, but the city is being used widely in all sorts of ways by all sorts of people with all sorts of technology. That's our new reality. So our actual public pavements do already include lots of micromobility users using all types. So I think they need to be inserted into that complete streets hierarchy. And maybe the hierarchy really needs to be squared off so it doesn't imply that one level is on top, is more important, takes up more of the streets. Characteristics of micromobility: battery electric motors, small pavement print, low speed, no licensing or registration, and they offer very little protection to those users. Nothing engineered in. I'm going to call all of those people, active transportation and the micromobility users, as vulnerable road users. And they may be untrained people or toddlers or 100 years old. They may be illiterate. They may be Olympic athletes. And quite often they're distracted. The motor vehicles, their users, the drivers, must be adults or at least over 16. They're trained, they're tested, they're licensed by Nova Scotia to operate the motor vehicles, and they're presumed to be alert and in control. And what they're inside of, what they're driving, cars, trucks, buses, they are engineered for crashworthiness. They are engineered to protect their occupants in collisions with other motor vehicles. But they're not really engineered to protect anyone who's not inside a motor vehicle. I have a degree in physics a long time ago, but it's still true. Momentum is what matters in a collision. Here we've got a little tiny blue bar at the left. That's a cyclist at 15 kilometers an hour, compared to the momentum of a driver in a car at just 60 kilometers an hour. The ratio, 200 to 1. Where's the vulnerable road user? Not the driver, it's the cyclist. And the same thing is true of power skateboarders, ordinary skateboarders, scooter users. So, which road users are going to get injured or killed? It's the vulnerable road users. Active transportation, as you have previously defined for us, human-powered, muscling, walking, pedaling our own bikes. But I'm going to add in micromobility users. They're on the streets. I've seen them all over the city, and they're good for the tourists. They're good for a lot of people who want to get around quickly, do the last mile a little faster than they could walk. We've got the not very vulnerable road users. Those drive motor vehicles. Some of them share their vehicles, some take buses, some drive alone. So, micromobility, on foot, on wheels, using micromobility, they're all part of a green end of the spectrum, active transportation. Motor vehicle transportation could be fairly green if you're riding a bus or taking a taxi. If you're driving alone or with passengers, not so green. But let's look at where we really put the money in this city, where we put our attention, where we put our staff. On the left, that street users hierarchy puts driving at that little corner at the bottom. I'm sorry, when we look at budgets, where we look at staff allocations, where we look at how we're developing the city, the big fat bit is at the bottom, where the motor vehicles live. The buses, shared motor vehicles, the drivers. A little bit goes for pavements, for
About 1
upgrading.
minute left, Peter.
Pardon?
About 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. We have a real problem with this. I do have some more notes, but I'm not going to show those slides. I'm simply going to wrap up and say, this gives you the problem that I see here is, let's add the words vulnerable road users. Let's give them a high priority of what we want to cure, what we want to deal with, and be very aware of showing the reality. When somebody bitches about bike lanes taking up too much space, remind them how many thousands of acres of pavement are dedicated solely to cars. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Questions from Committee. Councilor Mancini.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Zimmer, thank you for your presentation. And I understand the vulnerable road user, so I'm not quite sure. Are you suggesting we should be reallocating our funds to develop a structure for them? I'm not sure where you were leading to it. I understand that we're not protecting maybe the vulnerable road users as you're suggesting as much as we should, but I don't understand. If you had an ask today, what would that ask be?
I'm definitely not suggesting that we enact new bylaws, enact new separated traffic patterns for each of these. I'm saying we do today see disability scooters going on the sidewalks, going in the bike lanes, using our crosswalks.
Yes.
Usually pretty safely, usually pretty politely.
Right.
We see scooter users, many of the same kinds of things.
Right.
They're using the bike lanes, but technically they're not supposed to be there.
Right.
E-bikes, my e-bike, or when I have my motor on my bike switched on, I'm not supposed to be in those protected bike lanes.
Right.
Or using the bike lanes that are not protected by paint. The symbolic thing, that's not infrastructure. So yeah, I think we need a wide dialogue. We need to bring people who are involved with all of the different micro-mobility modes together with the active transportation modes and say, how do we develop a culture that gives us safety and freedom and doesn't force the city into building more separated bike lanes? Although maybe the separated bike lanes become also separated for the micro-mobility users, and they're safer.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. There's nobody else on the list, so I'll just speak briefly from the chair. The staff tell me that the micromobility report should be coming back sometime maybe in the fall. They're hoping to have, the province only created the ability for any kind of bylaw around micromobility in the last session of the House. So something we've been working toward and had ambitions toward can now happen. So I imagine that will, I guess the question would be, and I'll take a note of this and I'll go talk to staff, is would the micromobility bylaw go to the Active Transportation Committee or not? Because it's not in the TOR and maybe it should be. Like, how are we going to do that? How do we solicit that input? So I think that's a really well-made point, and I appreciate you taking the time.
I think that's a very important point, is how do we get the discussion happening so it's informed by the knowledgeable people? That is, people who are using micromobility now, are seeing the problems of it and the opportunities of it firsthand. I know the city did a report earlier on micromobility that was looking at the potential for micromobility e-scooter shares, a commercial enterprise. I read the report. It did not talk about the individual users all over the city who are buying their own gear and using their gear, And I think, to my mind, it isn't just a matter of laws. It's a matter of finding a way to develop a culture that's ethical, filled with empathy, that is as polite as Nova Scotians at their best really are. There are always going to be, I won't say the word in public, but
Outliers. Outliers is the word.
Outliers is a good way to put it, yes. And on all sides of this deal, they give other people the bad name, whether they're drivers or bikers or,
Thank you. Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Zimmer, for your excellent presentation. I just had one question. I noticed in one of your slides you included taxis as a way of cutting down on the environment and the exhaust and all of that. I'm just wondering why you separated taxis from just one person driving alone in their car. Thank you.
because generally the taxis are transporting at least 2 people. They, as I see around the city, many of them are switching to hybrids. They probably pay more attention to maintaining their vehicles well, and they replace. If everybody took a taxi, drove their own car, the streets would be really clogged. So they become an alternative that's available to say, oh, I don't need to own my own car. I don't need to drive.
Okay.
So yeah, and that also goes for carpooling,
Yes.
goes for park and rides who go to the bus. The one other kind of thing that's missing in the hierarchy is that many people make many mixed mode trips. They will take a walk to get to the bus. And then from where the bus leaves them off downtown, they walk another 5 blocks to get to work. Or, or they are dropping their kid off at daycare, and then they're going to work for a while, going to a meeting, getting their kid from daycare, and back home. That could be 2 or 3 different modes, and it's chained, and that is not really accounted for in that mental model of you're either a walker or a cyclist or, no, I'm mixed. The only thing I don't do is I don't own my own car.
That's excellent. And no disrespect to taxis or taxi owners. Thank you for the explanation. I see where you're coming from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that concludes this one. I really appreciate you coming down. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak, Mr. Zimmer. Up next, we have 10.3.2, Commit to Act Streets for Life Week of Action, Martin Williams. Man, it's been a long time since I heard the Harbor Hopper talking while driving by during a meeting. That was great. I wouldn't say normal yet, Councillor Mancini, but approaching something like it. All right, as soon as we have that up, we'll be ready to go, and you'll have 10 minutes. But you already knew that, Mr. Williams.
Hi, it's nice to see everybody's actual faces and, sort of stop hiding behind Twitter and things like that. It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me here. I'm going to actually start with my proposal because I have a lot to say, so I'm likely to gabble and run out of time. So I think it'd be best to say up front what I'm asking for. I believe it's a very simple proposal. It's probably, I would hope that you can accept it's very feasible. And it's a simple request for a series of perhaps 3 meetings to review the road safety framework and how that's been going, and to do that alongside all of the stakeholders in the road safety framework, staff and yourselves, very importantly, or at least 1 or 2 representatives from the Transportation Standing Committee. And the purpose of those meetings would simply be to review progress, to review how the stakeholders believe it has gone for them so far, and to understand where things need to be strengthened, and to understand what can be done within the current term of the road safety framework to address issues, and to perhaps make that a non-public meeting, but to make it happen, to bring heads together, and to have an open review, not set necessarily a formal agenda, but just to have a series of discussions to understand from everybody's perspective how it's working. If I just move on with the actual presentation. So I just wanted to have a look at these really key provisions from the road safety plan. There's some good words in there. It requires significant cultural and legislative changes in the approach taken towards traffic and road safety, road design, enforcement, and the education of road users. Vision Zero acknowledges that people make mistakes and that the road system needs to protect people. Facilitating collaboration with other road safety stakeholders is the most important function of this plan, and that's key for me. And the other very key thing, using an equitable approach during the implementation process will ensure that HRM's most vulnerable populations are engaged and see an improvement in road safety. There's some very good words as well in the National Road Safety Strategy, just to pick out the ethics. Human life and health are paramount and take priority over mobility and other objectives of the traffic system, i.e. life and health can never be exchanged for other benefits within the society. The road safety framework, it made clear that it was a framework, essentially. It did refer to a plan, but it would, the progress would be through the development of action plans that would be developed alongside all stakeholders, and that they would be critical in this process of developing action plans. So, for example, the report that you'll be reviewing later today seems like really that kind of thing should have been part of an action plan that was developed in conjunction with the stakeholders, in my opinion, from reading the road safety framework. So here are some critical action points from the framework. Develop action plan for worst 10 types of pedestrian collisions. Consider rates, frequencies, consistency of collision patterns and crosswalk-specific assessments. Create a team, including all lead agencies and other stakeholders, primarily committed to greater safety for all road users. Create team now and use team to more effectively deliver current programs. Develop safety branding and develop safety culture. Involvement all participating agencies. This is some data I've seen in the report. I don't know where the data that staff are referring to, but I can, from the data that I've seen on the collision database, we're looking at a slight increase, obviously an increase since 2020 because of lower traffic volumes, but a slight increase in pedestrian injury and fatal incidents since 2019 for 2021. So there's no real signs, in my view, from the data that pedestrians are really benefiting from the efforts to date. That's not really making a strong impact. Also from collision data, 72% of pedestrian incidents are occurring at intersections, 65% of cyclist incidents are occurring at intersections, versus 43% of all traffic-related incidents. This is the collision data for pedestrians only. The brighter red spots there are the more concentrated areas for pedestrian collisions. You can see here the Halifax Shopping Centre area, a downtown area here, and the area along Dutch Village roads as well, and some other key points. You can see as well that incidents are concentrated along major and arterial roads and intersections. I'm going to skip over this because I think you also have data from staff which looks really good on main locations. This is my some incident data from the collision data showing the worst locations. And for cyclists as well, you can see that the collisions are concentrated often along main collector roads. There's specific roads that you can pick out from this data where you can see that they are more problematic for cyclists. And that's likely to continue because obviously they're going to destinations, they need to use main routes just like drivers. I don't see that shifting with the creation of a minimum network. That's like a separate issue that needs looking at. And some worst locations for people cycling. There's one that I met Lucas Pitts at earlier this week at the Joseph Howe Drive and exit ramp to the 102, which is causing some issues, and I understand some work's happening there, and the Arndale roundabout. The incident data, I'm going to focus on signalised intersections because it's a key area where you're looking at today. It's a problem for pedestrians and cyclists because of the mixing. You don't have the separation of vulnerable road users from vehicles, and that's obviously causing a lot of incidents. The data here conflicts with, given in the right on reds staff report, seems to conflict with the data you're going to be looking at today, which shows around 27% of incidents occurring due to right turns versus 9.4 back in the staff report in 2020. But a very considerable amount, much larger than that, caused by left turns. Here's some data which was very well presented from the May 2018 report, and you see some as well today, so that's putting it in context. You can see a very significant amount of incidents at signalized intersections. Although we don't read this in the staff reports, it's important to think about how feasible the permissive yield system is for a child, for a senior, and for a person with a physical or intellectual disability. So this is a complex task. It's something that would probably be complicated even for an adult as part of their driver training, and yet this is the lack of a system means that children and other people kind of have to work this out for themselves and how to deal with this triple conflict of right on red, right on green, and left on green. So I got my children to draw some pictures, and it's perhaps a lot more of a complex task than we acknowledge it is for children to negotiate, and seniors, of course, and anyone with limited mobility and with an intellectual disability. Some research suggests that removing these, introducing protective phasing doesn't have a significant impact on traffic flow. I don't know if there's any research. I couldn't see any referenced in the staff report, but I think that's worth looking at. And emphasizing here at the end that some really simple measures. This one at Dunbrack and Lacewood, it's only part-time, but the red light stays on until you can almost complete crossing. You can see it's on number 15 here. And that holds drivers back until you've almost completed your crossing. So it's like a long leading pedestrian interval. But in fact, it's not that. It's something to prevent driver-driver conflicts, but it actually works. It kind of solves two problems at once. It solves driver-driver conflicts, and it solves driver-pedestrian conflicts. So
1 minute there, Mr.
Yep.
Williams.
Thank you. And another one which prevents people from parking around intersections and enables sight lines. I don't really have time to comment on the staff report, but I would like to propose also that the proposals in the report are considered during the sequence of meetings which I'm proposing, and given a bit more further thought and context. There are some numbers in there that are seriously disturbing. There's a very large amount of people struck every year from turning drivers at signalized intersections, and it needs some input from stakeholders and some consideration perhaps from experts like medical experts and people who understand more about the impact of crashes on people's lives. So I would like to propose that staff that the decision today is to explore these issues further and to get further context, as it's essentially about people's lives. And there are some issues in there about widening intersections as well, which I think would benefit from other input, perhaps some outside consultants.
The end. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Going once? Going twice? Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. I appreciate you coming down today, as always, and all your good work on this file. We will move on to, next on the list is item 11, information items brought forward. There are none. 12 reports, 12.1 staff reports, 12.1.1 bilingual stop signs on HRM-owned streets. Don't think, is there a presentation on that, Roddy? No? You want to go straight to the motion? Who would, Councillor Mancini, if you'd put the motion on the floor.
There's not a bilingual presentation?
May
would
we?
be very
There, you're
impressive.
done. That's all I got. My kids were in immersion, though. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to put the following motion on the floor, that the Transportation Standing Committee recommends that Halifax Regional Council 1 endorse the letter of support template included in attachment 1 to be used to indicate support for communities and or groups in HRM that wish to apply to have bilingual English-French stop signs installed on provincial roads within the municipality as part of the provincial funding program. And 2, support option 3, a targeted approach to replace existing stop signs with bilingual English and French stop signs on HRM-owned streets in communities, neighborhoods, or near facilities identified by the Office of Diversity and Inclusion through consultation with communities as being established Acadian Francophone communities or are demonstrated importance to the Acadian Francophone social culture. Thank you. Identity, and authorize the mayor to send a letter of support included in attachment 3 to the province in the support of CSAP's request to install bilingual stop signs in the vicinity of the schools in their area in HRM. So moved.
Moved by Councillor Mancini, seconded by Councillor Outfit. Go ahead.
Very quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for doing this. Brad, thanks to the team. You know, we have over 12,000 French as first language in our municipality, and so aligning this effort with the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works bilingual stop sign, there's a number of options in the report, and you know, I agree with option 3, the targeted French Acadian communities. I mean, to be nice to change all of our stop signs, but I mean, at $1.5 million, it doesn't make sense to spend that money. So I think it shows a lot of respect for our Francophone and Acadian communities to go into their communities, go into their schools. I know my district will benefit. I have numerous Francophone schools, and it'll be well appreciated. It shows respect. And also remind those communities are welcome signs are trilingual now as we come into HRM. And I think there's other communities that, you know, I think of Catherine Morris's community that maybe at some point in time we need to look at signage that's in Arabic because of the strong Arabic community. So I fully support this. I'm happy to see this, and we'll look forward to having this discussion again at Regional Council. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Good work, staff. We'll move to 12.1.2, Crosswalk Flag Program AO Testing Product Governance Motion. I saw Councillor Mancini for a minute. Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I put the following motion on the floor that the Transportation Standing Committee recommends that Halifax Regional Council 1 adopt Administrative Order 2022-006 OP, the placement of crosswalk flags, Administrative Order as set out in Attachment 1 of this report, and 2, adopt Bylaw S313, amending Bylaw S300, the Streets Bylaw as set out in Attachment 3 of this report.
Moved by Councillor Mancini, seconded by Councillor Stoddard. I saw you blink. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor?
Yes, if I may. Be careful blinking, Councillor Stoddard. You could have been at an auction. You could have just spent $1,000 there. And so I'm glad to see this finally here. Thank you to staff for doing the work. You know, the flag crosswalk flag program started in my district on Waverly Road, where in fact I live also. You know, at the time, there was a number of reasons why. Obviously, safety was the number one reason why the residents wanted this. At the time, too, we were instituting a different philosophy. When we were repaving our streets, we were reassessing crosswalks and taking those crosswalks away if it didn't meet a certain number of crossings, which I still don't agree with today, but that, for me, was one of the reasons that this program was started. You know, the crosswalk program, you look at it, I think it makes the crosswalk more visible. You see in the report, the actual people using the flags and crossing is limited, but the visibility piece. But I also think we've also done a lot of work, and I know that the leader of this program, Norm Collins, is in the audience today. Brian Slomwhite was somebody else helping him out in the early days. I compliment them because I think it actually pushed us to do some of the great work that's being done by our staff right now. You know, some of the challenges that we had of flags originally, you know, they weren't to the standard of what we see in the municipality. They weren't consistent. They could be ragged. There was no logoing, a number of things of that sort. It just wasn't that quality. That quality has since improved. The program is based on volunteers running it. But since then, when it first implemented, we've seen a lot of good stuff. We've seen the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the reflective crosswalk tape to make it more visible, the advanced yield to pedestrians, leading pedestrian intervals, and a lot of things. So a lot of good things have happened since this flag program is in place. And one of the other reasons why citizens like the flag program, because they would feel like crosswalk is not safe, they would approach us and we would look at it. Takes us a long time to assess, make a decision, get back to. I mean, it is what it is. With a community-based program, if it's allowed, you can make one phone call, one email, and the next day they see action. So no wonder our citizens like it, right? But we don't move that fast for a whole bunch of different reasons. So that is frustrating. So my question here today for staff, the AO that's being presented and recommending that we approve, so what's the difference to this program if the AO is in place versus the AO not being in place? What does that really mean? I mean, I wonder if someone could share that with me. Everyone's looking at each other, looking around back there. They're calling a friend. Roddy, that's right. Yeah. You could have pretended to be looking at your phone, Roddy, and you wouldn't have seen them look at you. So the big question, Roddy, is by putting this AO, what does that do? What does it do to this program as it exists today? If the AO is a thumbs up today and if it gets implemented, what's the difference?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, Roddy McIntyre, I'm manager traffic services and road safety. And through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the AO provides more consistency and stability in how we're approaching facilitating the implementation of crosswalk flags. There were questions over the years about, can they be placed here, can they be placed there, based on conditions. So the AO lays out pretty clearly, where they can be placed, where they can't be, expectations around kind of upkeep and maintenance of the flags so that they don't end up being just kind of left. Sometimes the flag buckets are empty on one side of the road or empty completely. So it just helps to define roles and responsibilities and makes everything clear for the community groups and for staff in moving forward with this.
Could you also speak to, why not all-way stops? Why not roundabouts? Why is that, in your professional opinion, not a good place for the flags?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, for roundabouts, they're not expressly noted in the AO, but they would be, as long as the roundabout is set up, like if you look at North Park or the Armdale, the yield point is actually past the crosswalk, so we will now allow the flags at a location like that,
okay.
Where you've got the crosswalk signs, the RA4 signs. That indicates that the crossing control is there, the yield point is beyond, so it's not a controlled crosswalk. So places like the Armdale and the North Park roundabouts, where they're laid out where the crosswalks are actually in advance of the yield, they could be placed there. Other locations like always stops or traffic signals, again, we want to stay away from those because those are locations where vehicles and drivers already have a requirement to stop, whether there's a pedestrian there or not. We don't want to get into situations where somebody is misinterpreting, well, this person stepped out, doesn't have a flag, I don't need to stop. It's already represents the highest level of control for that location.
The last question, if I may, Mr. Chair. So was there any discussion when you're going back to looking at an AO of in fact saying, well, do we really need this program anymore? So I listed a whole bunch of things, and there's many other things that we've now put in place that we didn't have when this program first started. And originally I supported it, my original reason for supporting it because we didn't have those things in place. And so until something better came along, I was continuing to support it. So was there any discussion about not having it anymore, that it's lived its life?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, we certainly did have those conversations internally, whether or not, now that we've gone forward with some of these additional treatments and products, is it still really necessary to have the crosswalk flags? And ultimately, we stepped back and looked at it and said, well, we're continuing to get the requests for them. The community groups and residents are still feeling that, in certain instances, they find some value. So, in the spirit of working with the communities and some of the advocacy groups, we felt it was probably the best step forward to just continue to facilitate and support some of those initiatives.
Okay. Thank you, Roddy. Appreciate it. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini, Councillor Otit. I was trying to figure out if I could slide in past chair or chair emeritus.
Old guy. I didn't have white hair till I came to council. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Roddy, and thank you, Norm. Like Tony touched on there, originally I supported this, and I still do. I will be supporting this, until something better came along. I think we all said that. And in a number of places, some better things have come along. I just wish we had the money to put the rapid flashers everywhere. I wish we had the money to do lots of things. And I wish the province would let us put up those different colored signs. And I hear that once again, they've rejected our request to do that, which I think is unfortunate, although when you're in rural communities, you see them and they stick out a mile long. You see the fluorescent green a mile away. But anyway, we work with what we've given, and I really do want to thank staff for continuing to try and advocate for the signs, but also for this AO and for allowing them to continue where they are needed, where they are requested within parameters, and I'll still say until better things continue to come along. I'm very pleased where I've seen rapid beacons. I'm very pleased where I've seen RA5s. I'm very pleased with the zebra markings, all things that we've done during my time. I look at Roddy, at our roundabout on Lyra UTEC and how that was studied and how it was improved with the rapid flashers and this sort of thing. So I really think we're trying. Anyway, I'm happy to support this, again, until something better comes along, but I really wanted to thank staff and Norm for this. So I don't know if you want to say anything about my frustration with the province, Roddy, but Brad's bolder sometimes, but we do try within the power that we are given to move things along, but we sometimes our hands are a little tied. He's just going to nod, Mr. Chair.
You can speak if you'd like, Rod.
I'm going to nod and smile.
He said he's going to nod.
But thank you both. Yeah.
The mayor and I have both been remarking recently how councilors should all have to carry, and maybe senior staff and all staff, a copy of the Serenity Prayer in our pocket. The wisdom to know the difference between what we can and cannot change. So there are no further discussions. Councillor Stoddart has joined. Councillor Stoddart, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I give you hands up and all of accolades, because I've had some rapid flashing units being placed in my district, especially at the end of Park Head, and I appreciate that very much. Just a question, kind of like devil's advocate. Do you feel that these flags give residents a false sense of security? I'm not, just a question.
No, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the devices are there for people to use or not use. It's their choice. Unlike, certain other official traffic control devices that are required to be operated, the flag is placed there for, somebody who feels they may need a little something extra. There may be somebody who maybe feels a little uncomfortable at a crossing, and if it's there to help them feel a little bit better about it. I mean, Councillor Out just said, sometimes a marked crosswalk itself could provide that false sense of security, but it's all about providing the tools, providing the infrastructure there that at least can help the public feel safer when they're crossing the street.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, staff. There's no further speakers on the list. Question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. That brings us to 12.1.3, protected turn movements for pedestrian safety. I see the Sainted Jill Morrison here as well. Is anybody, do we have a presentation on this, or are we going straight at it cold? We're going straight at it cold. All right, who'd like to put the motion on the floor? Go ahead. I'll come down. Yeah. I'll ask Councillor Stoddart to come on up here.
I'll put the following motion on the floor, that the Transportation Standing Committee recommends the Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to, 1, prioritize the evaluation of protected-only left turns at the signalized intersections identified in the recommendations of the micro-traffic report. 2, prioritize the evaluation of protected left and/or right turns at highway vehicle and pedestrian volume signalized intersection locations in the next phase of the Strategic Road Safety Plan. And 3, identify resource requirements, staffing, software, et cetera, associated with implementing a protected-only turn program for signalized intersections. So moved. And I'm good, I'll let the chair.
I don't,
Got it. Oh, there we are. Thank you, thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, staff, for this. I have a couple of questions, and I'll just dive right in. So I agree with most what I'm reading. Here is the nub of my concern, and so I'm looking for some staff input, because I'm tempted to defer this and send it away for a supplementary report on my main concern, and I think we heard a little bit of this from our presenters today, which is there's a real focus on having to re-engineer the roads to make 3 lanes to do right, left, straight. And, you know, just to cut to the chase, when you travel around the country, I can think of many opportunities, many situations in many cities where I've been where they don't do that, right? Where they still have the control turns. Maybe they do LPIs, maybe they do, you see in Montreal a lot that they do green straight arrow on a single street and then pedestrian only. And if people got to turn left and right, they have to wait till that green arrow cycles, and then the pedestrian crossing ends and they go to a green, a full signal so that you can do left and right, which the first time as someone from Nova Scotia you hit on the plateau freaks you out, because you're like, what do you mean I can't turn left here until it cycles? And so I guess that's my concern is the example that was brought up by Mr. Williams that I looked at on Google Maps of Joseph Howe and Scott. You know, that Scott Street isn't wide enough to do 3 lanes. I don't think it needs engineering, but I do think that there are other solutions. Like the whole goal of this motion was to deconflict pedestrians with turning vehicles, right? To make it so that they both have their own clean shots as much as possible. And the North of Windsor, I think, was one of the examples in the staff report. This is a problem with moving desks. Now I don't have that in front of me. I'm doing it from memory. Was we got to widen this to 3 lanes to make this work. And I don't think that's the case. I think you could do a whole series of other things leading up to that would impact the speed of traffic, but the primary goal is to deconflict pedestrians and vehicles. So I'm wondering if staff could kind of comment on what about interim steps that we see in other municipalities short of going to 3 whole lanes of traffic to enable that?
do we have anybody from staff that would like to comment, please?
Here I am looking sternly at Lucas, and now it's poor Jill who has to come up and.
I'll start.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. I believe, first of all, there are interim steps, and we have been approaching those at many locations, as you know. And some of the examples given, North and Windsor and Joseph Howe and Scott, are some areas where we're looking at alternatives. But where the motion was protected only turns, this was kind of the direction the report took. And in order to get protected only turn movements through signal phasing, there are infrastructure requirements, changes needed.
So there's no kind of interim step of accepting that you're going to have a conflict. Like what I see in other cities, not in every location, it's not ideal, some would need to be widened, is you can't go straight because the guy in front of you is turning left and it's not wide enough, and that's just how it is. But they have deconflicted the pedestrians and the turn signals. And what I read in the report is we're not willing to do that. So I'm just trying to unpack that because I don't understand how we landed there.
It isn't that we aren't willing to do it. We are limited in the types of signal heads we have, and so even without widening, we are requiring additional signal heads in order to have the arrows and through movements shown. So even that requires some engineering of our signal poles. Maybe we need to go to a bigger, wider pole, in which case some of the corners can accommodate larger mast arms for separate signal heads. Those types of things. So even though some locations don't require widening per se. They do require us to have a closer look at it, and some engineering's involved.
So I guess my final question, and because I'm taking up too much time, and I hope some other councillors have some questions, is I will admit that as I read the staff report, I also was in the middle of like my first thing in Ottawa with GMF, and the board package there was like 200 pages and like all that. So maybe I missed it, but the feeling I got from reading the report, and I did try and read it twice, is that what we're saying is the primary focus would be on focusing on a handful of intersections, that we would only proceed with doing it in a lot of cases if we could widen the intersection. I didn't see the flexibility. What I'm afraid of is we're going to give direction here that says that those priorities are going to be more about building and not about the other things. Like, to me, a signal head, while not inexpensive, if it doesn't have a 1990s switch on it and has modern digital controls, that's something we can do a lot more easily than making a road wider. So I wouldn't want to lose that if we improve that today.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, just to add to what Jill had mentioned, we're certainly more than willing to look at other options, whether it's changes in signal phasing and timing, and other options such as we'll add additional clearance time all red to get some of those vehicles out of the way, or to ensure they're stopped, to be able to add an LPI to get the pedestrians out in front. Some of the other item, we're not necessarily saying that the only way we could do anything at all is widening the intersection. What we're saying is, in some instances, in order to be able to maintain some semblance of capacity on the network, some locations would require widening to separate out the movements. You may have a very heavy, say, left turn movement, and if you've only got one or two through vehicles that can't go, or vice versa, it starts to back up. Now it impacts the signalized intersection or the unsignalized intersection the next block down. Congestion gets to the point where it goes beyond what we're willing to accept through, the IMP principles, where we say, sure, we're going to accept a little bit more congestion if it makes this safer for the pedestrian and cyclist. But some of these changes, if they're not done properly, they can actually be relatively catastrophic. And what happens is now you've got a lot of people making bad choices because they're very frustrated with being held up. And that's what we want to avoid. What we're hoping to do with this is to be able to get the time to actually look at the intersections, see what can work, see what can't, make what changes we're able to make, and try to get some of that analysis done.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Is that all, Councillor Mason?
I don't really know what to do. Like, I don't have a clear enough reason to defer or delay. I guess I'll just continue to talk to staff. My hope is that we get to a policy set that clearly says, as fast as possible, do all these things. And I think we're getting there, but I don't think we're entirely there yet. This all started because of Dr. David Gass being killed at Kemp Road, my neighbor being killed at Kemp Road and Yonge Street about a year ago, and I would hope that we would put controlled, like, deconflict pedestrians on streets like that as fast as we could. But I hear what staff are saying, so I'm not sure I have anything to amend it at this time. I may have to come back with another motion later for further direction. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
I see Mr. Anguish was coming forward, and now he's... Okay. 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 Anyone? Question? No. All those in favor? Contrary minded? That motion pass? Oh, Mr. Anguish?
If I could, Madam Chair, what I would offer to the committee and to any other councillor is that you do, if you do, the best way to deal with this, and I now see how people are reading the report. I see the culture that, we've been trying to debunk, and I now see how it's been interpreted, and that's fair. What I would suggest, though, because this is a very difficult topic, it's complex, and it's very situational, very, very, very situational, and involves design. If in understanding this report, you have a particular intersection in mind, I would encourage you to reach out to the team, walk it through. just to kind of get the sense, because it was I'll tell you, this was a very difficult report to write. It was a very difficult report to edit because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. But I do want to just emphasize the spirit of what we are saying is we do consider this to be an urgent matter and we are moving forward with it. And we're trying to shape it to give council the confidence that we're doing that. And so it concerns me that perhaps we haven't, but hopefully through further dialogue, we can unpack this report a little better. It's, like I say, it's a little bit difficult to write. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anguish. I'm going to return the chair to Councillor Mason. Thank you.
Okey doke. 12.1.4, thank you, Vice Chair. 12.1.4, evaluation of updated 2008 HRM vehicle anti-idling policy. Now, someone would like to put the motion on the floor. Seems to be, oh, thank you. Seems to be your day for that, Councillor Mancini.
Well, I have the older agendas. I don't have the motion. Hang on a second. Let me pull it up. Is that my screen? Look at you, Katie. Just amazing. Here it is. Thank you. Put the following motion forward that the Transportation Standing Committee, 1, adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated June 15, 2022. Oh. And this is the one? No.
Looks like the wrong thing got copied onto the agenda. It's also wrong on the print agenda, so a moment for our excellent clerk to get us the right motion.
Yep. Thank you. Is that all of it, Katie? Mr. Chair, I put the following motion on the floor that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that the Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to, 1, maintain the current 2008 HRM vehicle anti-idling policy, 2, increase collaboration between business units and corporate fleet to identify and reduce idling, and 3, continue supporting Halifax, which includes commitments for achieving net zero emissions by 2030 for municipal operations by transitioning to electric vehicles, EVs, switching to clean and reliable energy sources, and reducing energy using in buildings, lighting, fleet, waste, and water operations. So moved.
Moved by Councillor Mancini, seconded by Councillor Outlet. Any further discussion on the motion? Nobody on the speakers list will move to vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. I'd like to thank our excellent Halifax team for coming all the way down here today. Hope you walked. Hope you didn't drive. All right, moving on. 12.3, there are no motions from members of the committee. 13, there are no motions. 14, in-camera personnel matter. We were requested to adopt the recommendations outlined in the report. Is there a requirement? Does anyone wish to discuss that in camera, or can we move the motion in public? Very good, Councillor Mancini.
This is deja vu on this motion. That's great. Pardon? That the Transportation Standing Committee, 1, adopt the recommendations outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated June 15, 2022.
Whoa, I see April waving, so it's written in a way that this means we still need to move in and pick somebody, right? Okie dokie. So thank you very much for that. That would be April Doucette from the clerk's office, who herds the cats of appointments. Thank you for that. So what I'm going to suggest is that we complete public participation so we don't make poor Mr. Williams sit around, and any other things like notice of motion, and then we'll go in camera, okay? So let's complete the rest of the public meeting first, if there's no objections. So there are no added items. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, we'll move to public participation. Norm Williams, if you would please come front and center. No, Norm Collins, sorry. It said Williams on the paper in front of me. The clerk apologizes for the mistake. Mr. Collins? Dealer choice. There you go. Sure. Sitting at number 2 for the person in the control room. Please go ahead, Mr. Williams, or Mr. Collins. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. A few things. I had this presentation or comments or whatever, but it strikes me as somewhat backward that public participation happens after the discussion, debate, and vote. Certainly you had the written submission, and I trust, reflected on and considered that. But I guess I would like to suggest that in future, public participation that relates to a specific item that's being discussed and voted upon happen in advance. And I know that has happened on occasion in the past. I would encourage it to happen again. We, as a society, are obviously very pleased with the AO. We're very pleased with the direction that the Support of the Crosswalk Flag program has taken. The creation of the AO itself, I know question as to was it needed or not. I think creating the structure and formality around it is a positive thing. Is it needed? I don't know, but I do think that that's a positive thing. There are a number of things in it that are very positive, being allowed to install crosswalk flags at RA5s, being allowed to continue to install them at RRFBs. And that gets into that question of, do we really need them or not? It's our view, and I agree with Councillor Oudhead, when we have better options, that's great, but having multiple options is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to give those who do use the crosswalk flags, and they do at RRFBs and RA5s, et cetera, that added sense of security, I guess, which goes to Councillor Stoddart's question. And I know that this issue of false sense of security has existed since the beginning of the crosswalk flag initiative back in 2008, 2009, and some hold that view. As Councillor Oudhead had said, the existence of the crosswalk itself, the marked crosswalk, can create a false sense of security. We questioned at the time when that point was brought up, what's the difference between crosswalk flags and the RA5? Somebody pushes a button, would they not have the exact same false sense of security by marching across? Not that some don't, but it seems analogous to us, and we never did get an answer to that as to why in one case you have a false sense of security, or you might, or it's theorized, but in another case that you don't. And actually, I guess you can talk to a bunch of lawyers and get different opinions, but one lawyer actually indicated to me that in his opinion, it created an enhanced sense of security because the pedestrian is actually reaching for a flag. They're thinking about their safety very consciously. That was that individual's view. Since we wrote the submission, obviously there's been clarification on roundabouts, and we're very thankful of that we be allowed to put crosswalk flags, if requested, at roundabouts. And historically, there were requests at Armdale and Larry Utek. Whether they'll still exist now, I don't know. The all-way stops, obviously, if there was one change we would like to see, would be to allow crosswalk flags at all-way stops. There have been, again, we talk about requests from the community, concern about safety. It's all very nice and fine to say that with the stop sign, the driver is already obligated to stop. Well, with a crosswalk, the driver is already obligated to yield. The fact is that in many cases, or some cases, I can't quantify it, that just doesn't happen. So what is that added protection? What is that Vision Zero sort of protection that if a mistake is made, if the person, you know,
30 seconds.
is going to go through. So we would like to see that, and in discussions with Lucas, he's indicated he's open-minded to that, and we hope that moves forward sooner than later. The last thing I'd like to say is that this has taken a long time to get here. The motion was originally in 2017. We are very pleased with and want to acknowledge the speed at which Lucas has completed and brought this forward. I met for an extended period of time with both Lucas and Brad, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that they took the time to listen to the input that we had and support of the program. And hopefully we will see more crosswalk flags in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norm. Any questions for the speaker? Questions of clarification only? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. There are no additional speakers on the list, so I will now ask if anyone else in the gallery would like to speak today. Looking into the gallery, that would mean either of the media representatives here would have to come down and speak. Matt just volunteered. No, he's saying no now. So going once, going twice. There are no, so we will declare public participation closed. The date of our next meeting is July 28th. We will take a motion to go in camera to discuss that item. Moved by Councillor Outlet, seconded by Councillor Mancini. All those in favor? Opposed? We will be moving in camera. Thank you all. Are we good? We're good. All right. Okay. So, Councilor Mancini, if you put the motion on the floor. And this
Happy
would
to
be
put the
for
following motion on the floor,
14.1.
that the Transportation Standing Committee, 1, adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated June 15, 2022. And 2, direct the staff report dated June 15, 2022 be maintained as private and confidential. So moved.
Moved by Councilor Mancini, seconded by Councilor Stoddard. Any further discussion on the motion? Can't be. It's in camera. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So as I said before we went in camera, our next meeting is July 28th, 2022. My plan for the committee and staff, we discussed it in agenda, is the summer meetings, you'll be pleased to know, will be virtual unless we're compelled by something we can't imagine to do otherwise, and we'll return to face-to-face meetings in September. So with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Outhill. We are adjourned.